When you made that, would you make the call? 'Cause did you or you didn't make a call
This is a very important point. Ashley is bluntly asking, did he make a phone call that morning? Let's see what his response is.
to
I
start
don't
working with
remember
it?
that evolved. No, I didn't actually. I'd asked one of the detectives. There's only one detective there that morning.
Okay, gotta stop it. So he just lied. That's a blatant lie. That is 100% a lie. I don't know if he has. Again, he's getting up there in age, so maybe he's not remembering everything clearly. That is a lie. All right, hello guys. Welcome back to the Midnight Report. Today's video is going to be a bit different. I did a documentary on the JonBenét Ramsey case about 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to do a follow-up looking at the latest interview that we've gotten from John Ramsey on the actual case. I think there's some really interesting comments that he makes in this video, and I want to break it down, given that I've done hours and hours and hours of research into this case, provide my own insight into things where sometimes John Ramsey doesn't have answers for certain things, or sometimes he doesn't add up with what has been stated about the case. We're not going to go through all of Crime Junkie or hosted by Ashley Flowers. We're not going to go through her entire interview with John Ramsey in today's video. If you guys like this, we'll keep doing this by parts, but we're going to handle about the first 20 minutes as I think there's a ton of interesting stuff within it. And this is not my full documentary. It's not me presenting all my evidence on what I think happened. If you want to check that out for the documentary, I would highly recommend it. If there's things I'm saying that maybe counteract or are different from what John Ramsey is saying, or even the discussion as a whole, check out that video for more context. I'll try to explain as best I can. I would also recommend highly checking out this original interview, maybe then coming back with full context. Now, I have watched bits and pieces of this interview. I've watched the parts that we're going to talk about in today's video, but there's a lot I want to discuss here in terms of what we're going to hear him talk about in terms of how they treated Burke or how they went about trying to protect Burke from the police, in terms of some of the interesting stuff that's come out about the case from Burke's interview with Dr. Phil, and also the phone call that I really have a big emphasis on and why I think that's so suspicious. We'll have all of that from John Ramsey's own mouth in his latest interview that was done about 8 months ago.
I've done a number of interviews over the years, and my main reason for engaging the media is to keep pressure on the police
Yeah.
to do their job.
That's a very interesting thing to say because, as we've talked about with this case, when we look at even the earliest interview that Patsy and John actually did, they hadn't even done an interview with the police. So, him saying that, oh, we did all these interviews for keeping pressure on the police all these years later to try and find who killed JonBenét Ramsey kind of comes off a little hollow to me, just given their actions. I want to point something out. Actions mean more than words. And so there's a lot of words that's going to be said in this interview. And I just want to point that out right away. When you hear John Ramsey talking about, oh, I've done all these interviews to try and get the police to keep doing their job, you've got to also keep that with a grain of salt that they themselves were not cooperative with the police in terms of even getting a formal interview until months after JonBenét was found dead.
And I've never wanted the questions in advance.
Guess we're going to be pausing this a lot, but he literally did. His whole team wanted to dictate the questions that were going to be given by the police. So this is very different. I guess the media, it's different in terms of, okay, you're not being interrogated by the law, but it's really funny to hear him say this when we have proof that this is the opposite. His team was trying to get Patsy and him to have nice terms in terms of being interviewed together, seeing the questions that were going to be asked, directly contrasting what he just said.
Because I want to respond spontaneously. If I have a made up answer, then I think, what was my answer for this question?
Mhm.
I'd rather just ask the question and I'll spontaneously respond. And it could be, when did you stop beating your wife? And no boundaries
I love
on the questions.
it. I got lots of questions.
Yeah, and so
It is interesting that he brings that up because I do find it interesting that I don't think a lot of times the people that interview John Ramsey come up with good follow-up questions. Like, sometimes John Ramsey will talk about a certain topic, and we're going to see that in this video. I actually think Ashley does a very good job of interviewing, but there's a boundary that you have to walk in terms of when you're interviewing somebody that a lot of people think might have, committed a crime, or maybe you even yourself have some belief towards this case. How do you keep that civil without, appearing accusatory, but also then getting to answers that people want to hear? And I think that there is not a lot of great interviews with the family, and I do want to point that out, that Ashley does a very good job as we go through, as I'll point out.
it's easier for me
Yeah.
it's almost like I don't have to prepare.
We'll get into, I think, why they kind of looked at you guys as a whole. But even in looking at the family, I do feel like at least initially, Patsy like bore the brunt of that.
Before we get into John's response, I do actually agree with Ashley in terms of when this case was first starting. There's a lot of fingers that pointed towards Patsy for a number of reasons, because you do have the idea that she could not be ruled out for being the person that wrote the note. A lot of the connection to all of the theories, if the Ramseys were involved somehow, allegedly, it was Patsy that wrote the note. And so she came under a lot of fire because of that. She came under a lot of fire because you look at the background, you look at JonBenét being in the beauty pageants, is what led to, if there was an intruder, somebody, finding her and then doing what they did. And there's been a lot of criticism of child beauty pageants. I'm one of those people. And just the way Patsy kind of behaved, a lot of the pressure went to her. So I do agree with Ashley on that. I wonder what John's going to say in kind of in response to that.
Good.
And for like a
Big
long
time.
time, I even watched something they did on Netflix a while ago called "The Casting John Bonet," and there's like a line in there where the guy is like, "Oh, I bet she was probably a horrible bitch of a mother."
No, she was a wonderful mother.
I do want to point this out. I don't think that either John or Patsy like did not love their children. They very much gave me the vibes that they cared about their children, all that kind of stuff. And so I don't agree with statements of just throwing around, oh, they're horrible parents. I think they're flawed parents. I think they definitely maybe had some missteps here and there. We don't know the whole story, but they definitely like weren't perfect by any means. But I don't think, like, this is the thing that I think a lot of people get stuck in with this case is you can have bad qualities of parents, but then not equate that to, oh yeah, this was a mother that didn't care about her child, or she was using her child for the beauty pageants, all that stuff, and not have some nuance in there. These are people. And you guys, if you've seen my documentary, you know my thoughts on this case, where I think it goes. And we're going to break into a lot more of criticism for the Ramseys here, but I think here is where people get stuck down a rabbit hole of painting who these characters are when maybe necessarily they don't fit into them, while they could also still fit maybe the crime. So I think that's a little bit of an interesting conversation.
Latched onto her so much. When I
I
know
don't
that
know.
there was, if people want to have questions about what happened in the home, why is it her that everyone
I don't
became
know.
fixated on?
Patsy was a very strong woman. Maybe didn't come across so good on television, I was told by people.
I think that's a very interesting response, because Ashley asked a very interesting question. Why do people target Patsy in terms of all of this? And John doesn't necessarily have a response. He says she's strong and she didn't maybe appear the best on television. I think it's people looked at Patsy the most and she scrutinized her the most for a lot of different reasons. John doesn't really answer that. So again, we're going to start the pattern where John doesn't answer Ashley's question, or he'll maybe start to, or maybe he'll give a non-answer, and then he'll move on to something else. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind as we go through this.
But she was a wonderful mother. She's a wonderful stepmother. And I never heard her say anything negative about anybody. She's just a good person. And so for her to take the brunt of that assault,
Again, didn't answer the question. Just kind of moved on to something else. Didn't really address what Ashley actually asked.
is just so unfair. When we lost JonBenét, she got very focused on Burke. I mean, that was our goal. Was
This is where it's going to get interesting. We're going to talk about Burke here, or I guess Ashley and John will talk about Burke. And that's where I think this gets very interesting, right? They focused on Burke. They were trying to protect Burke. And we're going to look at and question some of the actions that they did. But it does make sense just in the context of, you lose your daughter. Your attention then should go to your son. Especially for John, who had lost 2 children. Your focus is going to go to Burke, who was also in the home that night. And I think we're going to get some interesting responses and things from John here.
try to give him as normal a childhood as we could possibly give him amidst all this chaos that was going around us. We were afraid. Somebody had attacked our family. We don't know who it was. And we were frightened, quite frankly.
Now, let's talk about that for a second. They were scared, all of this stuff. I've said many times, think about the way that they go about with Burke. So Burke is left in his room alone in the very early morning, the early stages of this kidnapping or alleged kidnapping they thought was happening at that point. Nobody was like around him. Patsy wasn't very clingy to him, worrying about the safety of their other son, of their other child. There's none of that here. When we look at the actions of the family, we then see that Burke is then taken out of the home where there is protection, there are police, then taken to a friend's house, unsecured location. It very much seems like the opposite of what the words are saying. Is that, okay, they ushered Burke away, all of this stuff, why? And John started to get to that answer. They wanted Burke to have a normal life. They wanted him to be away from all this chaos, all of this stuff. But when you're in the middle of this kidnapping case and you say, hey, let's get him out of the house, let's take him away from protection, away from private eyes, how do you know it's not your friend that was involved in JonBenét's kidnapping or whatever? There's just a lot here that words don't necessarily line up with the actions.
And one of the challenges, we wanted to keep Burke out of out of video and pictures so that people would know what he looked like. And so how do we get him from, we were living with friends when we were in Boulder, so he could finish.
So John's going to talk about a lot about here how he tried to keep Burke out of the media, all of that stuff, you know, even trying to do decoy vehicles, all of this stuff, going to such great lengths to take Burke out of the spotlight. And if you're somebody that believes in the Burke theory, this lines up a lot with the actions of that theory, that John and Patsy were trying to cover up what actually happened with Burke, maybe accidentally, again, allegedly killing his own sister on accident. And then you have the parents covering it up, trying to protect Burke. It makes sense. It adds up to the motivation to get Burke out of the house, get him away from prying eyes, getting him away from the police until they can build their story, until everything blows over, all of that stuff. And so a lot of what John is going to say here in this section of the interview is kind of about that idea of either you believe, one, they were trying to keep Burke out of this horrible situation where his sister was killed, or two, they're trying to protect him from people asking questions and making him maybe more of a subject, making him more of a prime suspect in the case.
The school year, how do we get him to school without being photographed? And it became a project. And the way it was diversion from grieving. We would send out a decoy car. Burke would be in another car on the floor in the back seat.
Just to go to school?
Yeah, to go to school. And we'd get him to school unphotographed because we wanted to protect him.
What were the kids at school like to him?
This is a very interesting question. I know what John's response is going to be to this, but the way I would think about it is kids are not the nicest. And I know John is not with Burke all the time at school. He doesn't know what the kids were saying, but I would assume this probably got brought up a couple times. And we'll see what John says here, but I think this is a very interesting question.
Oh, the kids are wonderful. And
Really?
Oh, yeah. And
That is my exact reaction to his response, is really? Now, I think this is more John probably doesn't know what other kids are saying, or even parents telling kids, don't bring this up with Burke, or things of that nature, not wanting to get involved in this stuff that's going right now for JonBenét's murder. So I think this is more John just not knowing what was going on. But I do find, like, I agree with Ashley's reaction. Like, kids are horrible
I feel like that's the first
to each other. Let me point that out. And, you know, not all kids are bad, but a lot of kids can be very rude, mean, all that kind of stuff.
time I've ever heard that. Normally school age kids are awful.
well, I say that, I mean, from my perspective, they seemed like they really were great.
Did you guys have any moments with him where you're asking, I think about like kids, like what are the things that the parents don't know? Like,
So this is a very important question. Basically, what Ashley is suggesting here, she's doing it very nicely. This is a great way of introducing this topic in question. She's asking, did you guys ever have a conversation with Burke about that night? And is there stuff that maybe he knows that the parents don't know? This is fascinating because, as we're going to talk about in this interview, in Burke and Dr. Phil's talk or interview, I should say, there was a reveal that Burke admits he went back downstairs after he was allegedly put to sleep, all this stuff. Now, multiple different stories of how that actually went down. But either way, Burke has publicly admitted, it's online, it's in the Dr. Phil interview, that he went back downstairs. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we get the rest of this conversation around Burke.
what's happening?
No.
with-
You know your children.
Well, and
Okay, but think about this. You're in the middle of a case in which your daughter was kidnapped, stolen from your house. There was no conversation that Burke knew anything. John shuts this down. No, no, no. Vehemently denies it that he didn't know anything. It's just interesting when we just got done talking about how John and Patsy tried to protect Burke. from the media, all that kind of stuff. And then instantly they shut down that Burke even knew anything. Like, what if Burke was sleeping and he got woke up in the middle of the night? Maybe he heard something. They didn't have that conversation. That's just very suspicious. And if they already know what's happening, right? If John already knew what happened, of course you're not going to have the conversation because you already know. So let's see how this conversation shakes out. It's very important.
Not even necessarily talking about, like, him doing something, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, like, you know, they
And this is a great way. Ashley is bringing it back. She's not trying to accuse Burke in terms of the question. She's trying to get to the point of, does Burke maybe have heard something? Maybe there's some information that Burke would know that would help find the intruder.
they hang out together, they have the same group of friends, like, was there someone that maybe she didn't tell mom and dad about, but she's gonna tell her brother about, or her brother, like, did you guys
Yeah.
have any of those, like, moments with Burke to be like, help us figure this out?
No, because we really just
This is mind blowing to me. No, you've never had a conversation about Burke possibly knowing anything. That maybe JonBenét talked to him about something that could have led to, oh, maybe some random person came up to JonBenét a couple days before that was, very suspicious that she told her brother, or maybe her brother had any other information that the parents didn't have. Parents don't know everything. Parents don't know everything about their children, despite what John has said in this interview. So very weird that he just flat out says no.
wanted him to be separated from it, from the chaos and we wanted him to have to be normal. And that
So John falls back on the idea that we just didn't discuss it because we didn't want him to be involved. So I mean, I can see that point, but it's just very suspect, especially given the circumstances of the case.
Mm.
was very difficult because being followed around by the media and going through the grocery store line and seeing your sister's picture on the front of the tabloid, it was difficult to give him a normal life.
Do you think he might still know something that he, like,
No.
doesn't even
So Ashley tries now a third time. Ashley has asked the same question more or less 3 different times. This time she's more direct and more blunt. And instantly, John says no. Keep that in the back of your mind. John at this point believes there's nothing else that Burke could tell them about the case. There's no point having a conversation with him. All of that stuff. He doesn't know anything. He was just asleep. That's the story John and Patsy told the police. And now we're going to get a little interesting in conversation.
know he knows?
No. Burke's a very solid person, um, despite all. And went to college.
So Ashley asks him, does he know anything, even a little detail that might help? John says no, and then starts talking about Burke as a person and his characteristics and his achievements. Again, you have that redirection of answers that we talked about early on.
He just graduated, had a good job ever since, well thought of by his employers, and very, very disciplined. Buys used cars, and not. He's a good adult. He was a good.
Like, what does any of that have to do with the case? I just want to throw that out there. So I want you guys now to listen to this point. John is going to say something like, oh, Burke is so good that if he did know something, he would say something.
Son. If he knew anything, it would not be something he would thought
Is important.
important.
That's what I'm saying, like, I wonder if there's something in there, like, even so I know in the Dr. Phil, one of the things that came out was, the idea that you used a flashlight to put him to sleep and that he came back down to play with a toy. Like, when he's down and people are sleeping, has he ever talked, like, did he get
So think about what Ashley just said. So Ashley is not letting John get out of this question. John has tried to get out of this question 3 times now. So now Ashley goes to, okay, well, the Dr. Phil interview, Burke says he went downstairs to play with his toys, whatever. He went downstairs after the parents had put him to sleep. At that point, if you're John, remember, the story you said on this interview the whole time is that Burke never went downstairs. If you're now, hearing that Burke had publicly admitted this, and this is probably a mistake by Burke or whatever, then now you have a situation in which John did not know that. John did not know Burke went downstairs, and even kind of is shocked, or I guess not believing that it actually happened. Well, this whole conversation of, oh, John of Burke would have told us something if he knew something, or we never had this conversation with Burke because he was asleep the whole time, kind of just gets thrown out the window because obviously there's more to this story that John is not willing to discuss, and that's why he's tried to avoid the question 3 times now.
the sense that someone else was in the home? Did he hear anything? I don't know how long was he up?
Again, Ashley is not asking an accusatory question. She's just asking, maybe he knew something else. What do you think about that?
No, we've never asked him that. I don't know. Uh,
Crazy, crazy response to hearing that Burke is contrasting the story that John and Patsy have told for 30 years. He says, "No, I don't know," and then crosses his arms in almost like a defensive maneuver. It's very, very weird and suspicious.
I didn't know, frankly, that he got up again.
Mm.
I'm not sure he did. Again, that's fiction.
That's fiction. You're not sure if that actually happened. It's fiction. Burke had said this publicly. So I don't know what John's talking about here, and you can see by the body language. Again, I'm not a body language expert, but very, very suspicious. He gets defensive, starts calling out things that, again, Burke said in his own words happened, and John is just like throwing it under the rug like it doesn't really matter.
So much fiction out.
Because it's just thrown out there. It's just Dr. Phil who says, "You got up to play with the toy," and Burke says, "Yeah, I did. It was something that I wanted to put together." And then it kind of just, like, goes
Well,
away.
That see again, that's substantial evidence, right? Because Burke, we haven't heard much of his story on anything that happened that night, and that's why that interview is so important. Burke then coming out and basically contradicting the story that his parents have told for years is a big part of the case, and that cannot be overlooked. And the way John is reacting to it, not acting like, "Oh, well, maybe we should have had this conversation. Maybe there is more to that Burke might know," is really weird that he just shuts it down. If you were really trying to find the killer of your daughter, wouldn't you go, okay, well, maybe Burke does know something. Maybe if Burke was up a little bit longer, if you're assuming that possibly the intruder could have been in the house at any point, when they were gone and they were coming back, they could have already been in the house. If Burke was up, maybe he could have heard something, maybe he saw something. But no, it's just the conversation has never happened, and John is saying it's fiction.
again, when we got home, JonBenét had fallen asleep.
But I know you and Burke
I put her
came.
to bed. Burke and I sat down and tried to put together one of his.
This also, right here, what he's just saying, I had struggles in research, but this also contradicts the story. The story that was told was that John and Patsy came home, the kids were instantly put to bed, and that was the end of it. And then we had contradicting stories in terms of John and Patsy both saying that they tucked the kids to go to bed. Now you're having another story here where John is saying, "Oh yeah, he actually stayed up with Burke a little bit longer and then put him to bed later." So which story is it?
His little toys for a little while just because he wanted to. And then he went off to bed.
You're saying, like, that whatever Dr. Phil said and Burke said on the show, he didn't come back down?
I didn't know
Mm.
that he came back down if he did.
Does
He
stuff
may
like
have.
that make you wanna be like, "Oh my gosh, maybe there's something he knows?"
Burke would have said something if something was weird, but
Okay.
Okay, so again, Julie has tried to ask this question 4 times. I put it 4 to 5 times now at this point. And so basically, the whole idea, once again, is okay, John doesn't know the whole story. That has just been proven. And he just throws it off as, I don't know if this actually did happen, whatever. If Burke knew something weird, he would have said something. But yet, Burke was up later in the night than you and your story says. And he didn't tell you that. You had to find that out in Dr. Phil, apparently. So, not great responses here from John.
he may have misunderstood the question
Sure.
too. That
I don't know how you misunderstand the question, and then he admits to going back downstairs willingly. But maybe.
Do you think
He-
Burke regrets doing it?
well, probably. But the things that were interpreted by the internet crowd, well, he's smiling.
Okay, so look how John shifts the conversation. The question that Ashley asks is, do you think he regrets it? And John goes, probably. But it doesn't address what Ashley just brought up about the inconsistencies in their story. He shifts the conversation to something that I find isn't really all that relevant, talking about the idea that Burke was always smiling in his demeanor, which, yeah, some people have brought up. I've kind of just thrown that to the side just because I think that he may be on the spectrum. That's what a lot of more medical professionals have said. So, again, I don't really care about the points he's about to bring up because I don't think they're all that relevant. But again, it's shifting the conversation away from something that John himself has been asked 4 to 5 times and has come up with, I don't know, and no, or this is a fiction, or this didn't happen. So, yeah.
Burke talks with a smile.
Yeah.
Just the way he is. You ask him, what time it is, he'll smile.
Yeah, they lit him up after that.
I know it. And that was very unfair.
Do you think there's, like, one thing that those people who will never believe you, like, hone in on? Or, like, one thing you're like, "Man, if we would've done this thing
Well,
differently."
That is a very good question. So, right now, if you're going to answer this question, the things that I would expect to hear would be in terms of maybe our actions, in terms of the interview right after we find our daughter is dead, going to Atlanta directly afterwards, maybe the way that we invited our friends over, maybe some of these other things like the pageant stuff. There's a lot of different things you could look at if you're going to respond here from John, and it'd be a very innocent answer, but look at what he's going to respond. I just want you to guys keep that in mind. This is what do you think that people hone in on, which makes it to where they believe you're guilty? What is his response to that?
I don't know if there's one thing, but, we were portrayed as very rich people. We didn't get.
So his first answer to that question is that they were portrayed as rich people. Again, this to me does not have all that relevance in this case. Of all the things you think that people hone in on and why they think that you possibly could be involved with the death of your daughter, doesn't have anything to do with you being rich. Like, yes, that might have influenced people at the time, like when the case was first happening. People are jealous of, them being upper class, all that kind of stuff. And John's going to talk about for like the next couple of minutes about how they're not wealthy, they're all this stuff. They had financial issues after all that. It's just not all that relevant. Like, you think about what she just asked, and it has stuff, and it's stuff that has almost nothing to do with the case. It's almost like another non-answer misdirection. But even though with here he does answer the question, it's just of all the things you could possibly respond to, all the criticisms people have, the phone calls, one we're going to talk about in this first part, that's not an answer. Like none of that. Just crazy. I also do want to point out, I mentioned this in my documentary because of this exact moment. They are wealthy. They were wealthy at the time, getting a bonus of $118,000, especially given back in 1996 with inflation now. Like, that is more than most households make in an entire year. So don't give me this crap that you're not wealthy. Your house was huge. I mean, okay. I know people don't like being portrayed maybe as being rich because of the stigmas that come with that, but let's not deny the facts that you were upper class.
Consider ourselves rich. We built a little computer business, sold our interest to Lockheed, and
I mean, for like a pretty penny, though.
but I got that was more money than I ever thought I'd have in my
Yeah.
life, And then we got into this child beauty thing, which Patsy.
So this is also important. A lot of people have criticized the family because of the child beauty pageants, myself included. I think child beauty pageants are disgusting. I don't understand why anybody would ever put their child in those kind of things. And then also, you think about the fact that if you're a parent, your child is kidnapped, then killed, and it is directly related to them being in the child beauty pageants. That's undoubtedly how the person found out about JonBenét. You think you as a parent would have some sort of regret or maybe some doubt about your past actions. Maybe not straight up saying, okay, we should have never put her in there, but in terms of at least thinking about it. And the fact that when we get into this response from John, or him, really, he brought it up himself about the child beauty pageants, think about the way he talks about it and if that's the way you would react.
He and JonBenét had fun with it. And Patsy's philosophy with our kids was let them try anything they want to try.
Mm-hmm.
Patsy, when JonBenét was, she'd been maybe 4, I guess, was diagnosed, or maybe 3 or 4, diagnosed with ovarian.
So again, there wasn't much there in terms of remorse, or maybe we could have done things differently, just trying to back up and defend the actions of both him and Patsy, of putting her in the beauty pageants. He's then going to talk about Patsy's cancer diagnosis and how that might have fueled her actions to trying to live the most that she could with her daughter.
Brain cancer, stage 4, which has about a 5-year life expectancy, and that's it. And Patsy was so distraught. She'd say, God, why did you give me these beautiful children if you're not going to let me be here to raise them? But she was a fighter, and she beat it. She was in remission. For her, it was a huge gift that she could now perhaps look forward to being with her children when they go to college, get married, and have her grandkids. But I think deep down she knew that may not happen. And so she tried to cram a lot of mother-daughter stuff into their lives together. She was a natural. She loved
She was a
performing.
stunner, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way she was. And she'd put on little skits at home and make us interrupt our dinner and watch the skit that she and her friends
Oh,
put
great,
on.
yeah.
So it just that was her personality.
But I do want to point out, like, I do agree in terms of, I think that JonBenét did like to do the pageants to an extent. She did seem very performative. There's also conflicting reports, though, in terms of how much she enjoyed them. Did she want to do them all the time? How much did Patsy, make JonBenét do those pageants? How much did it mean to JonBenét versus Patsy? Even the quote I brought up in my documentary about how that these awards are more for Patsy than they are for JonBenét. A lot of that kind of stuff. And again, John's just trying to really just show that it wasn't Patsy living vicariously through her daughter, JonBenét, even though I think that to an extent she was. I think that the two definitely probably bonded over it, but I think that it's very clear Patsy, to some degree, was kind of living out her dreams through her daughters.
They had fun with it, but it wasn't an obsession.
Yeah.
And of course, the
Exactly what I
media
just talked
presented
about.
it as Patsy was this dominant mother who was living vicariously through her daughter.
So again, he kind of makes it extreme. I don't think it's an extreme. I think that it's very human, and people sometimes run into trying to live their dreams through their kids or their interests. And I think that that was present in Patsy. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that I'm gonna make the claim of what John's talking about. That people are saying, oh, she was this very strict mother that was overbearing on JonBenét about doing all this pageant stuff. I think that there was a mix of things in there that I think play into the idea of, again, it's not all that relevant because the point we're trying to get here is to the child pageants are what led to, if an intruder killed her, that's where it came from. And so that's the point of it, is where is the remorse? Where is the doubt? Where is the second guessing on the decisions being made? There's none of that here.
Forcing him to do this stuff, that was nonsense. JonBenét had fun with it and loved it.
If people say that you profited off of it, what's your response to them?
So I'm going to kind of skip this part of the video because I just think it's a weird topic of discussion. I know people do bring this up, possibly that John was profiting off of JonBenét's murder, but I mean, that's just not really true at all. Anyway, any angle you come at it from, if it was an intruder, the Ramseys were somehow involved. He lost his daughter. He definitely lost money because of the hit to his reputation, all of that stuff. John did not profit in terms of his overall life from that situation. I don't really feel like there's much to discuss in this section of the video in terms of relevance to the actual case. And so I do want to kind of just move on and get further into the ransom note.
A lot has had to have changed over 30 years. Like, when you think about, like, you're in it day 1 in the house, you think it's a kidnapping. How do you think differently now about the ransom note than you did?
So let's think about what she just asked. So she just asked, basically, very generally, what has changed in your thoughts about the ransom note since the day that you read it? What you would be thinking, or what I would think about saying if I was John, given that you believe it's an intruder, is that you believe the ransom note was meant there to redirect the cops away from who truly did it. In terms of the intruder was making this ransom note to buy time, to make it look like a kidnapping while they try to escape justice, all that kind of stuff. That is what my response would be. So let's see what John Ramsey says and how that adds up with what we know about the ransom note and all that surrounding it.
Day 1?
Well,
Like, at least I have to imagine, like, like, if it were me, I imagine that I've, like, picked this thing apart 10 ways to Sunday.
Exactly. If somebody murdered your daughter, that you'd be thinking about this ransom note a ton. You'd be going through every single line, picking it apart.
it didn't make sense, first of all.
I know in some of the interviews they bring up for Patsy that this it goes back to the note, and I think one of the reasons they keep those who believe she wrote it perpetuate the idea that she wrote it is because it seems like it's not a clear like, answer or direction of, like, how much of the note she saw.
So, more or less, John doesn't answer Ashley's question at all. Basically gives a non-answer, doesn't say anything. So Ashley tries to dig a little further. She goes a little bit further into people that believe Patsy wrote it, believe that because there's a lot of misdirection. It seems very performative. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So she's going to ask John, what does he think about people that think maybe it was Patsy because of all these different reasons? And even how much did Patsy know about the letter prior to making the phone call and all these other actions? I even discussed in my documentary. John apparently had read the whole note before the phone call and then made Patsy call. So, how much did Patsy know about this note, all that kind of stuff? And this is going to be John's response to all of that.
'Cause, like, initially, she's, it's like your daughter, we have your daughter, and then she goes up and looks, but then she talks about later, looking out the window and seeing that it's a marked car and being concerned, and people will say, "Oh, how did you know that?" That was later on in the note. People will say,
So, just bringing up the fact that they also didn't really follow the rules of the note. So, how much did she know?
"Oh, when she calls 911, how does she know how it's signed if she only saw the first page?" 30
don't know.
years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. It was chaos that morning, and I really thought I'd get JonBenét back.
Okay, so let's just think about his answer. His answer is, I don't know. And then he starts talking about, oh, I thought I could get John Bonet back. That has nothing to do with what Ashley just said. Again, it's a non-answer. We've seen this all throughout this entire video so far, and even only the first 20 minutes of the actual interview. He doesn't answer. He then follows back with, I don't know what Patsy knew. I don't know. And that's it. And then it goes back to John saying that they could get JonBenét Ramsey back, even though we're talking about the ransom note, not like finding the body or anything like that.
I don't have $118,000 laying around, but a friend of mine who was my banker got my ATM limit on my Visa card
Jacked up.
jacked up.
Again, this has nothing to do with the case. It has absolutely nothing. It is complete redirection, trying to talk about something else that John is more comfortable with. I don't know what else needs to be said here. I mean, we had a really good question by Ashley. Basically asked two different ones. John doesn't answer either one.
And I gave that card to a friend, I don't know who it was, somebody that was there. I said, go get the money. And he came back and didn't get the money. And I was like, why didn't you get the money? Like, well, no, I don't need to do that yet. But anyway,
Why 118? That's something that everyone's
well,
obsessed with.
yeah, that
Very good question. Why is it your exact Christmas bonus? And if that is the case, well, they would have to be somebody that knew you personally or was very close to you or had access to your pay stubs. That doesn't get brought up here, really.
there's it meant something to the killer.
What do you think it means? Like, I mean,
Well,
again,
the only number that correlates that I know of is my bonus that year from
Obviously. I don't know why we're dancing around this. This is 30 years. We've had time to like go through all this case. We know it had to do with your bonus. The question is, what does that mean? Like, what do you interpret from that number?
Lockheed was 118,000, and it was paid in January.
Mhm.
Now we're in December. It was on my pay stub every.
did you have those somewhere in the house?
Oh yeah,
Another good question. So, if somebody broke into your house, could they have found out what this was, and is that why they demanded it? So John says yes. Yeah, there definitely were pay stubs.
I'm sure laying around somewhere.
Did they ever find them?
I don't know.
Another I don't. How do you not know? This is the stuff that makes no sense to me. If that was so crucial to the ransom note, and you have the listings of what your Christmas bonus was, how do you not know if they did or did not find it? Like, was it laying out? Was it not laying out? This is like crucial stuff, because if you want to point to the fact that this was an intruder and they did all this stuff in the house, this is vital, because okay, yeah, they found a pay stub and that's why they wrote that amount. Saying I don't know doesn't help anybody in this scenario. It's just like, oh well, I'm just not going to answer another question, which is basically what John has done for 16 and a half minutes into his actual interview, and most of his answers have been I don't know or misdirecting the conversation.
So it comes back to somebody who's like, so clearly they know she's in the basement. They're not actually looking to get the money, but you think it was more of a message?
I think it was a mix. I mean, why not a million? Why not 500? Why not a big number?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big number, but doable.
John doesn't answer the question again. Ashley is asking, okay, so since they, of course, were not trying to actually get this money, this kidnapping was really looking like a misdirection type thing because we know she ends up dead. There's nothing that John like responds with, "Oh, well, maybe it could have been that it was a kidnapping, it was planned, and then something went wrong, she ends up dead," or any like anything else besides the idea that just why 118,000? Like, yeah, that's an interesting question, but that has nothing to do with what Ashley just asked you. It's what's so frustrating about this interview.
And why 118? Why not 100? Why not 200?
150.
It meant something to somebody.
People will they just pick it apart.
Oh, I
Like,
know it.
this is
And
what
it's
happens.
crazy. It's like I was criticized for disturbing the crime scene when I
And this part of the interview just really annoyed me because John is going to bring up something else that has nothing to do. We weren't talking about this. It has nothing to do with what the conversation was talking about. Is John's going to talk about, oh, people criticizing him for disturbing JonBenét's body. And on one side of it, I do give John a bit of leeway because I think if you saw your daughter dead, I don't know how I would react. I mean, you would be heartbroken. You wouldn't know what to do. Fine. But the fact that John then comes back going, I have basically no remorse, could you don't understand all of this stuff when this could have been a major piece of the crime. Let's say John does not remove the tape, does not do any of this stuff, leaves the crime scene, undisturbed. Could that have helped get the intruder or any of that stuff? That is more the point here, is that there's no remorse, like what we talked about with the pageant stuff. No remorse, there's no self-doubt, none of that. Same here. There's no self-doubt here from John. Yes, explaining why you did so is important, but also then going, maybe in retrospect, I shouldn't have done that. I disturbed a crime scene. Totally right. My critics, they're right. I didn't think about that because it was my daughter that was dead. That's not the response he gives.
found JonBenét. Oh my God, he removed the body.
The sarcastic tone really bothers me as well.
If you're a parent, what would you do? You'd pick up your child.
Like, and I don't even think he's wrong here. It's just the attitude. It's the way he's saying it, and seems like he has no reflection on it. He has no doubt on it. Nothing.
I was relieved. I found her. Thank God.
Yeah.
Took the tape off her mouth and tried to untie her wrists. I couldn't because they're tied so tightly.
I also caught up on this. That's actually a lie, or at least maybe he doesn't remember it right, or he doesn't actually, I don't know how tight they were, because when we get to the medical report, the bindings on her wrist were not tight at all. They were performative. They could not have actually restrained her. Any of that stuff, they were not tight at all. So that was a weird little slip up, maybe, or maybe he remembers wrong, or he doesn't have his facts correct. I don't know. Either way, that is not correct.
I didn't see the garrote. It was so deeply embedded in her throat.
That part is true. Even police detectives did not know until they did the medical report.
Oh, he disturbed the crime scene. That
Here he goes again. This is what I'm talking about. I swear, the Ramseys make themselves not likable. This is the type of stuff, like this face right here, is what makes people not believe you.
that was wrong. It's like, that's laughable to even say something like that.
It's laughable to suggest that, John, you disturbed a crime scene that could have helped save your daughter, and here you are saying it's laughable. Like, again, I think there's a human emotional, but there's also the logical thinking here is that emotionally, I can understand your actions, but logically, you should look back and go, this was a mistake. I made a mistake. There's none of that, which really bothers me.
Of course you would.
And have you ever been back in?
The house? No.
Would you ever go back in?
No.
Don't blame
No.
him either way of however you believe the things went
We
down.
couldn't.
Don't blame him at all. Not
Initially,
going
this
back in the
wasn't
house.
even. A friend of ours helped us move, packed up all our stuff, and we moved to Atlanta, which was
So this is going to get to my biggest point. I talked about this in my documentary of one of the big points of this case where I kind of came to my opinions was this moment we're about to talk about. We're about to talk about the phone call and them going to Atlanta. And we're going to get a little confused, or at least John is at some point in here, or else he's not going to say exactly what Ashley is suggesting. Firstly, we're going to talk about the phone call that John made to his pilot for his private plane, made within only a couple hours of the kidnapping of JonBenét. Again, before she was found and her body was found, that phone call. We're going to address that. And then also John and then the family going to Atlanta in the following days after she was found dead.
It was our home. That's where my family was. That's where Patsy's family was. JonBenét was buried there. My oldest daughter was buried there. So I was accused in the media of fleeing to Atlanta, but
Again, he kind of laughs this off, but think about the context of the situation. So your daughter has been found murdered. The police are trying to figure out who did it. The first couple days are the most important to a case, and you're leaving before even giving formal interviews, before putting the whole story and giving all your full cooperation to the police. You then leave within days. And I get the whole idea of, we had family there. It felt more like home, all that stuff. But it seems like, again, I also agree. I think the idea that they were fleeing from the police is not unheard of. There's a lot here that seems to back it up in terms of actions, not words.
that was
Yeah, so
home.
that's something that, people talk about is they say, "Oh, so I mean, day 1, they find JonBenét, and within the hour, John's on the phone saying, I've got to get to Atlanta." And people say it was for
So Ashley is wrong about this. This phone call took place it was around 10 o'clock in that general area. I don't remember exactly what time, but it happens before we actually get to the point where JonBenét's body is discovered. This is not something that happened after the murder. Like, this isn't something that happens, okay, we find out what happened. They want to go back to Atlanta to be comforted by friends, all that kind of stuff. That's not at all what happened. John was on the phone with his pilot. We have the testimony of the pilot that he was trying to book a flight to Atlanta for a quote unquote business meeting. John himself also would say this in another interview. So John would make a phone call that was recorded. Again, multiple different police saw this happening and had to tell John that that's not a good idea and shut that down. This is not speculation. This isn't theory. Police have this directly in police reports. So this is fact. Unless you think multiple police officers are lying in their police reports, all that kind of stuff, that's what we're talking about. So I did want to clarify that. Ashley might have gotten that a little bit wrong. That's not the way it actually did happen. But also remember, we're talking about the phone call that happened the day of JonBenét's murder. Not days after, the day of. Let's see what John says to this. This is a very vital part of the case for me. It's one of the things I cannot get over with their behavior, the Ramsey specifically. So let's see what he says.
business meeting. Like, what was that?
Well, that's not quite the way it was.
Yeah.
But
Well, John is right. It isn't quite the way it was because it happened a little bit earlier.
so there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
Agreed. There's a lot of misinformation about this case.
It's hard to even combat any of it. But Atlanta was our home. We had a family cemetery plot.
Yeah.
That's where JonBenét was going to be buried. My oldest daughter was killed.
That has nothing to do with the question Ashley asked. Ashley is asking about the day of. Now, the wording is a little different, but the day of, why were you on the phone calling your private plane pilot to get you to Atlanta? What is his response? Well, we were going to have her burial there, and we were going to go with friends and family. Our home was there. That's not answering the question. That's not answering the question. The question was, why were you on this phone call the day of for a business meeting? That is what we know is the case. The pilot backs this up. Police reports back this up. Multiple different accounts back that up. So why isn't John answering that question and avoiding that question entirely?
4 years earlier in a car accident, she was buried there. That was our focus, to get JonBenét buried, taken care of. Boulder was not our home. We had a house there, had a job there, but it wasn't home. Home was Atlanta.
Is
And
home, do you mean like you had a support system?
yeah, and we lived there for 30 years.
When you made that, would you make the call? Because did you or you didn't make a call?
This is a very important point. Ashley is bluntly asking, did he make a phone call that morning? Let's see what his response is.
To
I
start
don't
working?
remember how that evolved. No, I didn't, actually. I'd asked one of the detectives. There's only one detective there that morning.
Okay, gotta stop it. So he just lied. That's a blatant lie. That is 100% a lie. I don't know if he has, again, he's getting up there in age, so maybe he's not remembering everything clearly. That is a lie. I will just watch my documentary if you want to see the quotes, exactly the evidence I provide. Multiple police officers have this in their report that he made a phone call that morning, even before her body was found. We also have testimony from the pilot as well of trying to schedule a flight to Atlanta literally that morning. Him saying no, that did not happen, or he doesn't remember that that happened, is a lie. That is a factual lie that he just made there, and not answering the question, like he hasn't really answered a question the entire time.
And everybody else was on vacation. It was day after Christmas.
Also, want to point out the time that we're talking about when this phone call happened, there were multiple officers there.
But there were lots of detectives and police there. And I can't remember what I said, but like, I want to go home. And he said, yeah, that's fine. Go.
Nobody said that. I don't know where he got that from. The police were very adamant that they wanted to get formal interviews with the Ramseys, told them not to go home. Even in the police reports, we specifically have that they told them, yeah, it was not a good idea to leave. Your daughter's still, kidnapped, of course. So I don't know where he's pulling this out of his ass. This is another lie.
And Lockheed sent one of their airplanes out, which is wonderful.
We're going to now talk about some random trip that one of Burke's friends also got to go with them, avoiding the question, trying to get out of a very tough question to answer, which he didn't answer at all. And yeah, so that's where we're going to end the first part of this. As you can tell, a lot to talk about. I think this first part was very telling on how John doesn't answer questions or he lies. Ashley did a very good job, and I also think this was very well put together, just in terms of multiple camera angles. Audio quality is fantastic. But I think this is one of those times where I would love to see John in an interview where somebody would be willing to press him for an answer on that, because I think Ashley does a great job and she's trying her best to moderate this while also looking at people's criticism of him, trying to actually get an interview. This is a very difficult thing to do. But the fact that he just gets away with that when he just factually lied multiple times, and this is not the first time. I've seen multiple interviews where he does this, where they factually lie. Like, there's a difference between, okay, Burke coming down the stairs and the inconsistencies with the story. We don't know the facts of what happened there. We know for a fact the phone call happened, and he's saying it didn't. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys want a part 2, let me know, and we'll continue on. But yeah, let me know what you found the most interesting about this interview with John Ramsey. Also, again, shout out to Crime Junkie in this interview. Check it out if you have not.